Hi, everyone. This is Jason Sansucci with the Do You Know Drones podcast, and I'm excited to bring you another innovator interview. And we're coming across the pond and then a pond and a pond from the other side of the world. It is the future. Coming from the future, we have our friends at FlyFreely. We have Alex Urquhart and we have Dr. David Cole. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jason. Lovely to be here.
Thanks, Jason. Yeah.
I'm really happy that you're here. We're going to talk about a subject that I think is really important for everyone in the drone industry. You know, it's really funny. I was just doing a little research because I like doing last second research. It's fun. It's really hard to get a number of commercial drone pilots for the world. It is almost impossible to find that. But I would guess it's somewhere in the several 100,000, without a doubt. Maybe even close to 1 million at this point. But no one actually knows because people don't count and China's not telling. So there's a lot of people out there that are doing this commercially, that are trying to make money, that are trying to figure out this thing called scaling. Now, this is a very important topic for everyone because scaling is a little bit right now kind of like the Holy Grail. Like, cool, we have an idea, we have subject matter expertise, we've done this like a few times or a few dozen times or a few hundred times, and we would love to see this scale, either with more pilots, with more areas, with more drones, with more. So that's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about how do we do that smartly? How do we take the lessons that you've learned at FlyFreely as a drone service provider turned software developer? How do you do it? We want to get your insights, pick your brains, and we're going to do it in sort of a free-flowing fashion. So I'm kind of going to jump in. I'm just curious if you could just tell the listeners, I mean, we could read your website, tell your story. Like, how did you get started in this industry? We'll start with
awesome. Thanks for the intro. So we started back in 2013 here in Australia as commercial drone service providers. And primarily working in the mining, agricultural, and construction industries, typically providing those survey type services, photography type services. We were lucky, we were involved in several innovative applications. So we did some of the first underground operations here in Australia, which was really pushing the limits. Which was definitely very different type of operations. In sort of our journey, we started to come across this problem of scaling. So we had multiple operations going on, multiple people in different places. And then how do you start to manage all those issues that start to arise from that? So typically what you'll start to see is how do you get consistency across everybody? So, it's great, one person, knows the process really well, but when you start introducing 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, you start to then get variability across everybody. And then you start to get rework. And I often refer to rework as the silent killer in the drone industry because no one really tracks it, no one records it, and it's kind of happening all the time and you don't really know about it until the client says, hey, this is rubbish, or where's my project? Then you got to go back and do it again. And that's for any commercial service provider, going back and having to do a job is an absolute killer, right? That is just a nightmare scenario. We basically started to build our own tools to help us manage that. So that's how the sort of company evolved. We've sort of now basically gone fully into building software and helping other organizations essentially start and scale and sustain their drone programs.
That's amazing. And like we said when we spoke, sort of when we were just discussing this, you're eating your own dog food, you're creating your own dog food to then eat it. That is sort of like the best way to build something, because you're building for your own real problems that you connect with on a very real level, and you need it. Like, you're building a tool you need, that you use, and therefore other people would also likely use it. So, but I want to back up. If I could back up just a little bit, sort of get this, like, there's a lot of folks that are getting in this industry today. It is exploding. It is absolutely exponential, the number of people that are getting into this, the number of companies that are more than just dabbling a toe now, that are moving along the stages of drone programs. But there's still so many folks that are back at square one, and they want to know sort of like, what are the gotchas? What are the things to look out for? What are sort of the first steps someone has to take when they're establishing a drone program?
Yes. So, and again, this comes from lots of, our own experiences and lots of conversations with customers where we do see the same trends appearing. And it is a journey, right? Everyone's at different stages, and there's different challenges at different stages. So early on, typically, you're literally just trying to prove the business case for a specific application. So really, what are the economics behind this? Is it something that will benefit the organization on sort of a daily or weekly basis, and essentially trying to validate that use case. Typically, after that happens, some of the challenges that you'll start to encounter is you then need to build support across the organization, because you want to get more drones, right? So you've proven up the case in the specific application. You now want to start getting more activity. So then you have to start essentially building support internally. And that's really where, if you don't do that step, you'll find it very difficult to progress. And so we've seen people adopt different strategies to achieving that. Sometimes it's just literally going across the organization to other departments, depending on how big the organization is, obviously. Providing them some drone services, right? Building up their buy-in so that there's some activity happening that they then can't do without. So it becomes almost embedded virally. And then that starts to gives you the support base to go up to higher management and say, hey, this is, we're getting value not just here, but over here and here and here. We think, you should throw some resources at this to actually formalize it up, get some structures in place, and turn this into something that is sort of a day-to-day part of the business. And yeah, so that's some of the things we see in the early days of the challenges and different ways people have gone about trying to overcome those problems.
So listeners, you all know that I love stories. So I want to sort of double click on this real quick, because it seems like there's still a bit of a leap, right? So if you can answer this with a story from your own, from one of your own client base, I think that'd be really helpful to everyone. When someone sees, because there's a couple different perspectives you can look at this. When someone sees this technology, they see, I don't know, like hope, glory, like amazing technology. Like they see these, but like when it come down to it, it's a tool. Like this is just a tool, right? That you're going to end up using. How do you take that? Share with a story. How do you take that tool and do that very first step? If I back up to where you were just saying about taking that first, demonstrating the proof of concept, I think we could spend an hour talking about that.
Totally.
I don't want to do that. I want to take a couple minutes with a story. If you could tell us a story about someone successfully demonstrating proof of concept, like, and be as specific as possible, because I think this is an area where some people that are technologists, they're not like Alex. They don't get growth. They're not salespeople. They're not marketing people. Like they're techie, geeky people, or people that want to understand it a little bit better, or they're aviation professionals. So like taking that first step can be very difficult. And I know a lot of people, so many people that are stuck right there. Can you tell us a story about how to get them unstuck?
Yeah, Alex, I don't know if you want to talk about Hobart, is it Prague? Hobart City Council, how he went about it?
Yeah, so there's a council in Tasmania in Australia, and it's probably 2017, I think it was. So that was, in the broad spectrum of drone world, that's still, many years after it all come out, but very few, particularly government-based organizations, which sort of taking the lead. But for those guys, a specific story, as you said, they, a gentleman named Craig. He's a bit of an enthusiast in it. He flew it in his own private time. He sort of got the value of taking photographs or imagery and sort of flying that around on his own accord. And during 2017, they had some pretty bad floods through through Hobart there in their capital city in their state. And during that time, unfortunately, they needed to do recovery efforts. So I think he said something around like 3 days or so, as far as manually assessing and looking through, some of the wrecks and sort of what happened and how they can do claims for insurance and all that sort of monotonous work. And he sort of pitched the idea of, hey, I've got some drones. Do you guys, maybe we can save a lot of time here, right? We can look at a lot of the assets, inspect them from an aerial perspective, or we can go through far quicker, far faster, and also far safer, obviously, than people sort of rummaging through floodwaters and trying to assess what's happened. So he sort of went out there, they did it, and I think he said something around, what was originally predicted as a couple of days to a week was, a couple of hours just to go through and take some photos and check some things out. And he, along with a lot of other people that we've sort of worked with, I think that, and I totally appreciate that first step is uncomfortable, but I think, that's, like you said, that with any process, right? It's like when you venture into the unknown, I think fastest way to do it within reason is to just jump in the deep end, try it. If there's different use cases people can do. But yeah, he sort of started with, post-flood assessments, and then moved his way into, they do a lot of things around tourism now, right? So he sort of proved that case. They were blown away. They saw the value immediately. They saw the safety immediately. And the company was sort of like, that's our business case. That's our ROI. We see it very clearly. And now he talks about things around tourism. They've got massive cruise ships that come in all the time. So he gets called out, takes photography, works with the agencies, shares the material. They begin to look into different use cases around fireworks for New Year's Eve, every year. Obviously, photography can get you so far, but he flies it up there whilst they're within reason, again, within safety, of taking those photography and streaming that for people at home. And it's sort of, I guess, trying to find that need, and sometimes, whether you call it luck or not, it's that pain or something that happens that you can't really avoid that presents an opportunity to then put drones into it, or there's other people who sort of are testing it out, or trying it in different areas, and then creating a business case from that. And I don't think no one likes to be an ambulance chaser to sort of show all the value when something bad happens, but definitely as far as an example, that was a really clear one. So that proved it immediately. He's been the chief remote pilot for 5 years now, I guess, or more, and they're expanding their program. And a lot of other councils are sort of looking to him, and he said they're calling him up a lot to sort of see what he's done so they can replicate it in their areas. Don't know if that answered that question, or if that was...
Yeah, no, I think that's clear. I mean, if I could summarize, like, it's kind of like you have to very clearly identify, and almost anything, you have to clearly identify a pain point, and then you have a new tool to potentially make that not go away, but do it faster, better, cheaper, kind of like the old NASA way, right? Mm-hmm. Two, right? You can't do all three. Not necessarily. You're doing something wrong if you're doing all three. That's
you can try.
You could try. Yeah. But I mean, that's just it. Like find a niche. That's one of the big things, right? Like experimentation.
Yeah.
I love that. Like I love the fact that if you have some familiarization, flying recreationally, taking photographs, you're transitioning like from a hobbyist to like a prosumer, and you're like, wow, it would be so much easier if we did this in your own mind's eye. And then without really talking about it, you just do it. You just go do it. There's a lot of stories. There's so many of those stories out there. So listeners, like, I want to make it very clear, because there's a lot of folks that do struggle with this. They do struggle. It's like, wow, there's a drone. There's software that does things, and they create these things. And you're like, I don't know, what do you do with these things? Okay, find an interest, find a need. Regionally, in your area, something you're interested in would be better. And then just play around, see what works. Like, see what makes sense. Like, that's something that I would recommend, because that's a good first step. Like, and like I said, when I was saying first step, I mean first step. Like, what do people do when they step off to go? When they get their Part 107 here in the United States, so they get the ES, so like you get your remote pilot license in the UK or wherever you are. There's always a first step. That is something I would recommend as a first step. Now, you all are experts on how to take not that first step, but the next, and the next, and the next, and the next. That was 5. Okay. That's what I want to talk about sort of for the rest of the time, and sort of also want to mix and mingle in what your software does. So I want to understand that a little bit better as well. And then we can tell people sort of where they can find out more information. So the next question, sort of leading along the phases, is, look, so as the program grows, if you've done the first step right, your program will grow. Absolutely. This is still a very new industry. and there's a lot of growth that's happening right now. So if you find that right thing for you or for your organization, it will grow. Absolutely. You become the champion, you find an internal champion, it's going to grow. Cool. That's fantastic. It's a high class caviar problem. Now, there's a lot of hurdles that you're going to come across. So what does the next step look like? If I'm going to be working with your organization, what does that next step look like? I now have this high class problem. I now need to grow. How do you help me do that? What's the next step?
Yes. So depending on, I guess, how fast organizations want to move, typically one of the first things they'll want to do is, or the question that will come up is actually around compliance. So, they've kind of proven up a use case, and now they're like, okay, am I breaking any rules by doing this more frequently? So if I am, how do I stop that? So that's where we can start to assist, and that's really just about trying to automate, because you don't want the compliance to be a blocker to going and doing things, right? So it's how do you make that as least impactful as possible, and obviously that's we built software tools to assist with that. And apologies, my lights turning on and off in here. So, and a lot of what people are also seeking at that early stage is just knowledge. So not just what are the rules and regulations, but what other pieces of software do I need? How do I, do data processing? What does work for other people? So apart from providing the software, we also try to provide information. So we're doing a lot of webinars recently with customers who have gone through this journey as a way of learning, but also providing the base documentation. So, we've got templated operations manuals and drone use policies and all these other business case tools, like all those sorts of things that you need to put in place, because when you do go to management and say, hey, I want a bunch of money to spend on drones, they'll go, okay, well, what are the rules? What are the regs? Are we compliant? What are my risks as manager? Are you about to open a can of worms that's going to cause a lot of pain for me? So it's a lot of doing the homework, right? Doing the homework, doing the legwork, then to get all the pieces in place. So, you can with confidence go to more senior people and actually really launch things from there with a strong foundation.
It's a funny story. Like I've heard it a couple times. So it seems fairly common. A CEO will come to someone that that has demonstrated success in the drone industry, and they will say, "Keep doing what you're doing, but keep me out of the news."
Yeah, exactly.
Pretty much.
Yeah. So, and that's that's just what you have to work within, right? That's just the nature of the beast, so to speak. That those issues will come up, and they'll come up even more as it grows larger and larger and becomes more noticeable by more people. You'll get more and more questions around these issues. So, that's typically what we've seen happen.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense, and I think that is great advice, and so I appreciate those insights. I think it was gonna be ridiculously insightful because there was like a bright, blinding light happening. I was like, "Oh, this is gonna be amazing!" So no, I think that's awesome, and I think that resonates with everyone that is sort of dealing with those stage of issues that is happening right now. And listeners, just so you know, FlyFreely has a sort of a drone program evaluator. Kind of like a tool that they have. It's a free tool. It takes about 5 minutes. I'll leave the link, below in the comments, so you could do it yourself. It is rather interesting. You can evaluate your own organization. You can evaluate other organizations. If you're working with other departments, you can evaluate themselves. You can evaluate them, give them some pointers, point them to some people that don't actually know what they're talking about. So I think it's a pretty valuable tool. So kudos for you all for developing that, because I do think it is intuitive and it definitely provides a value by itself. So great job there.
And just a few comments on that. it's essentially benchmarking your current program, and really what it can actually help you do is see what your future steps look like, because it actually, in saying where you fit, it kind of describes the things you would need to have in place to achieve that level. So we'd certainly recommend running through it, and it's not a competition. It's literally, where are you at, and then you make a bit of a plan on where you want to be in a certain amount of time.
Because I was going to say, it does. I know Dave's had thousands of conversations. The sort of data comes from our own experience, but definitely for feedback across these organizations. And as Dave said, sort of helping them with the initial foundations and experimenting and trialing and getting the process sorted. And then over time, when they scale, there's obviously opportunities, and there's, I wouldn't say threats, it's a bit dramatic, but like risks along the way. And I think it's a matter of, once we see that risk over and over and over again, it's like we should probably flag this with people before they do it again and again. And there's things like Dave always talks about, getting executive buy-in. So a lot of these large organizations, that's probably one of the really critical steps. I'd say at every stage, really, like proving the double-edged sword of, here's this great opportunity, cool, is it going to make me money, is it going to cost me stuff? Like, that's always the conversation, and proving that to a number's nice, but even just as far as what that involves. And there's the risk. It's like, great, we save $1,000 every year using drones, and we get all this capability, but if I'm in the front page of the paper, it's not really worth it. So how can we do it safely, appropriately, but then also make it really efficient? And it's a never-ending battle. So, and part of that process is, depending on where they are in those five stages, particularly in the beginning, it's good to get that executive buy-in as far as a very common takeaway. People want to work with the organization and build this program out, but if you can still got someone on the board at the top of the ladder supporting it and unlocking those gateways and letting you sort of do that, it becomes really difficult after a while.
I think one of the things that I want to make sure the listeners understand is, there's a lot of different things you can do with drones. That's very clear. What I always recommend is keep that initial use case very simple. Like, keep it very simple. Keep the complexity low. Now, that may change over time, and that's fine. But when it starts, you keep it very, very simple. So you don't have all of the bells and whistles. You're keeping it really, really streamlined. Very simple, very teachable, you can explain it to your grandma and they might actually get it. I think that's something that is the most successful operations that I've seen worldwide, hands down, have started that way. They've started very simple. Even if it's even if it's a very complex use case, they've answered it simply. So now you're doing this simple thing. When things become more complex, everything changes. Like, because I could tell you, if you're doing a simple thing for something for like a federal government agency at a very complex site and with a lot of exposure and all those things, a very simple operation become extremely complex. So I want to make sure people understand that there's complex operations, but then there's things that make it complex, even for a very simple thing, like even taking a simple photograph becomes ridiculously hard. Like, so how does your organization help organizations move from simple operations to those complex operations?
Yeah, this is basically something we experienced ourselves. Exactly like you say, doing a real estate photography job is one thing. Trying to go on an oil and gas site to take another photo, totally different ball game, right? So this is when we were designing our software platform. This is one of the things we built into the platform. So in essence, you can build workflows depending on the different types of operations you're performing. So you can literally build up a library of different types of operations with different complexities. And then when you go to execute those operations, you're basically getting all the forms and checklists, all the approvals you need in one nice, neat package. So that becomes repeatable. Doesn't matter who's doing those sort of operations. It's just like, pick option B, and I'll have everything I need to achieve that. So it's technically quite challenging that the software development team pulled that off, because in essence we can mix and match not just the regulatory requirements, but organizational requirements and client requirements, and drone requirements, and basically merge that all into sort of one workflow. So the end user, the end pilot in the field, literally just follows the process they've got in front of them, and they'll basically tick all the boxes that they need to tick.
I can imagine with that level of functionality that when someone is going after a job, for example, where you're trying to demonstrate to your customer your competency and everything else, having that sort of tool would let you do that a little bit easier. Like if everything's in one place, in essence, I could almost propose what I'm going to do from the legal standpoint, the operations standpoint, the safety standpoint, the insurance standpoint, the who's going to be performing the job standpoint, what equipment am I going to be using, all of those things, the maintenance, everything. Like since it's sort of one platform, I can imagine having that in one place becomes not just a powerful tool for the execution of the job, but the procurement of the job.
Yeah, absolutely. This is something we've been pondering, actually building out a bit more, is actually tools to allow the larger companies to engage operators and be able to see things like the operator's history and all those kinds of things, because the way we've structured it in our system is once the mission is in the system and you're kind of validated, it gets locked. So it becomes like an immutable record. So that can give any third party extremely high confidence that you have done what you said you've done. And that's kind of all validated and sort of locked in. Because it's, and so that what we're looking at is exposing some of that to give other companies visibility, so you can actually start to dig into an operator's history. But more broadly, typically, so there's limited capabilities to do that at the moment, but typically what would happen is, you would literally go through and fully plan your mission. You're going to put in who are my emergency contacts, what NOTAMs are active, when's the next service due on the craft to demonstrate that it's, the maintenance is up to date, and basically print that out in a physical report and hand it to the client. And that typically is the way a lot of people operate. And like I mentioned, what we'd eventually move towards is instead of handing over a paper copy, you're handing over a digital copy basically. So, essentially inviting in the client into your sort of workspace to actually interrogate what you're going to do.
Yeah, and like I said, I didn't mean the curveball there a little bit, but I can imagine if all that's in one place, and me as the operator having access to this system. I'm talking on the operator side now.
Yep.
I now have everything that I need to be able to sort of quote specific jobs, showcase workflows, demonstrate safety competency, demonstrate all of these things. Even if I'm not doing it within that particular platform, it's all right there. I can take it, copy, paste, all these things. That becomes an easy thing. And because I've seen that be successful before, because it just showcases a level of professionalism that a lot of folks, that the industry still struggles with, if I'm being very honest.
Yes. Yeah, and particularly when you're engaging with larger organizations, it's if you don't meet those minimum standards, you will struggle. Sure, they might give you a job, but to get repeat jobs, and that's the trick, right? You might get one job, but it's getting the repeat jobs. How do you do that, right? And this is where, not just initially, but then the follow-up of, here's all the flights I did, all the history, all everything. So it's very, very clear, what you did. There's no smoke and mirrors going on. You can demonstrate it all. If anyone ever asks,
it's transparency, right?
Yeah, transparency. Yep.
Yeah, and I think that's huge for any business that's trying to do business. If they see a black box, or they see a one-off, or they see we may get a different result with the same person at the same site again, maybe next week.
Mm-hmm.
If we start to demonstrate as an industry that we can have consistency through transparency, that's huge.
Yeah. I got to say that consistency aspect is probably the single biggest requirement almost, right? It kind of drives everything, particularly in terms of future ordering, right? So, If I do an inspection one day, it's $500. The next day it's $1,000. It's like, well, why is that? So, and not just the cost side, but also the data quality side. So I took this inspection and, the photogrammetry worked well. I do it next time, it doesn't work well. It's like, what is happening? So, again, that consistency is really, really key.
Yeah, I completely agree. So I'm curious. So let's be future looking for a second. So obviously you've worked with thousands of operators, clients, people that have very similar pain points, and you've seen them, you've trended them, you've built tools to specifically address them. And I'm sure your backlog for sprints is quite impressive, sir. I don't need to know all that. That's TMI as far as I'm concerned. But like, where do you see the industry leading? Like, where do you think they're going in the next couple of years, right? Sort of like, especially specifically those businesses that are interested or in the process of scaling.
Yeah, no, definitely. So again, super hard to predict where it's all going. But typically trends that we see that, and it's a lot of obviously the technology's doing certain things. The regulations are over here, and kind of keeping a check on the technology to a certain degree. But there's obviously a lot of push into automation, right? So that's automating the flying side of it is obviously with these drone in the box systems that are coming out. Now it's a question mark on how fast that adoption rate's going to be, for sure, and exactly where it makes economic sense to deploy those systems. So that's kind of still a bit unknown, exactly how that's all going to shake out. But in terms of the scaling, we're definitely seeing larger organizations basically say, how do we build out a capability? And it's generally a bit of a mixed capability. So there's some in-house capability, there's some outsourced capability, particularly for the more complex things or the more, dare I say it, mundane things, where getting their own internal people to do it is a struggle. So they'll tend to just get the, less interesting jobs, outsource them. And then they'll typically do the more time critical ones. So where it's like, okay, I don't have time to call in someone external. I've got to get something done. Or the more interesting ones they'll try and hold on to. But that is, you're now starting to see that start to happen, where it's becoming how do we make this part of day-to-day business, and using the technology. And we've had recent conversations with very, very large companies who have nothing, right? They're just starting. So that was quite interesting, because you think, quite large companies, they're going to be well advanced. Not so much. They're literally just starting and looking for that sort of anchor use case. So, but they're asking the question, right? This is one of the things that's changing, is everyone's asking the questions. And people are obviously, they're seeing the drone in the box and they're like, okay, let's start with drone in the box. It's like, well, there's probably time out. There's probably
time out.
a few steps to go before you get there. But again, it's stimulating that conversation, and they're looking hard at it. And then it obviously starts the conversation. Okay, well, that is quite hard. So where do we start? And kind of going from there. So that's typically the trends we see. What will be interesting, I know in Australia that there's a lot of work going on sort of regulatory reform and ways to automate the regulations. So we'll see what sort of impact that has in the near future. Depending on how that shakes out, that might accelerate things significantly. It's not real clear.
And I think and thank you. I think there's a lot of that everyone, so if we take this to sort of an international conversation now, which this has been clearly, I've tried to keep it really not that, but let's focus on that just for a second. Talk about the elephant in the room. Like, you're in Australia, like it is an entirely different regulatory space there, even for the same sort of jobs. Like, that's just how it is shaken out. And I am not ashamed to admit that we're behind the curve here in the United States. We are definitely behind the curve as far as even the conversation around streamlining. It's not a conversation. Like, that's not something.
Yeah.
Like, they're like, we got Lance now. You're like, it's streamlined. You're like, ooh, yeah, no, not even close. Cool. Appreciate that. That is helpful. That is step 1 of 200 that we need to take. That, oh, by the way, you guys have already taken like 50 of those steps. So it's like we need to, I think everyone is learning from everyone else about having these international conversations, because the overall sentiment is that we're all trying to do the same things.
Yeah, absolutely.
We all are using pretty much almost the same equipment. We have similar use cases. We have similar people that are innovating in these spaces. So it's like we kind of have a common group think around us, which can be an advantage and a disadvantage. I'll admit that. But I think for if we're trying to apply this sort of worldwide, I think setting a standard. Now that's a dangerous word. I'm going to throw it out. Because it is dangerous. Setting a standard around sort of what should be the process, because I think that's the biggest thing. The process is key, because that's what gives you consistency. That's what demonstrates safety. That's what demonstrates everything that a customer and a government, regulators that they're interested in, is that process. Can you consistently showcase safety, all of these things, these benefits that you claim? Can you do that by following this process? So they're developing a process, you're developing a process, and all of these little silos of processes are happening all over. Or if you're in Canada, they're processes. They're kind of right. So it's like, I think canning that process is critical. And that's what your software allows users to do, is have that process so that if you can follow this checklist and you can be checked off on that and you can demonstrate it and you can repeat it, that's what's key, regardless of the complexity of the operation. That's the key. The key to unlocking all of this is the process. Wow. Like, everyone, like, I'm like, that is the key. Process is the key. Like, I want to make that very clear, because I think people think that could be boring, and people can think that is not the sexy part. Back up. Rewind yourself in, right? Like, you need to understand that is how you win in any industry. And I mean, you can put almost anything. It's your process. And can you stay consistent with that process? That's how, Olympians win. That's how everyone wins, right? That's how everyone wins. Can you be consistent with your process? And what your software allows for is for people to be consistent in the process, so therefore they win. Wow, there you go. Well, free marketing, yeah, it's good.
Yeah, yeah, no, you're exactly 100% right. And this, it comes a little bit from my engineering and manufacturing background, where it's all about the process, right? Process improvement. And that's kind of one of the views we took on this is, in our software, there's basically 7 configurable stages, right? So, and what's in those stages varies by the complexity of the operation. So you're flying a small drone out in the middle of nowhere. You probably don't really need a risk assessment. You probably don't need many checklists. Yeah, it's fine. You want to do beyond visual line of sight, then you're going to need a rigorous planning process. You're going to need risk assessments. You're going to need pre-flights. You're going to need pre-departure checklists. Have I actually got everything I need, so when I get out on site, I don't go, oops, sorry, I've forgotten, a key thing back in the office.
I've heard it so many times.
So, it's that's where
batteries. Who needs batteries?
Yeah, charge batteries. Who needs those?
Right?
They charge themselves, don't they? So yeah, it was another key observation we had is you don't want to, and again, coming back to the simple operation, you don't want to have 15 checklists on it, right? Because guess what? No one will do it. This is another side of it, right? If you make it too hard, people just won't do it. And then all the good work you've put in is for nothing, basically, because your risk is still there. You haven't mitigated your risks of crashes and things like that. So so essentially users actually just build the workflows at those different stages, with the pieces they need. And honestly, what typically happens in the early stages, people will do the minimum, right? The regulations say, I need to do X, Y, Z, and I just do X, Y, Z. No more, no less, X, Y, Z. What typically happens is you get more and more sophisticated. You find that the regulations are not going to help your business, right? So the business issues that come up around like rework and things like that, the regulations don't care about that, right? So you have to go beyond the regulations. And typically companies will go beyond the regulations to build out something that a process, coming again back to the process, that works across, all the issues that rise up, not just regulatory risk, but business risk and financial risk and all those things. So yeah, what you're saying, 100% agree. It's seriously about the process. And again, yes, that is boring. That is not exciting, but that's, particularly when you're dealing with lots of pilots and lots of craft, that is absolutely essential.
Process is the key to scaling.
Yep.
Yeah, pretty key. Gentlemen, where can the listeners hear more about your thoughts, your software? Where can they go?
I'll pass to Alex because he's the marketing guru.
I think we've got. Funny you should say that. We've actually got a webinar next week if anyone would like to join with one of our power utility companies. So next Thursday, I believe. So it's a lunchtime Australia. It might be a little bit different for everyone else's time zones, but all our content's on our website. Most of it, that's all our webinars, our blogs, our free content you can take home. The assessment, as you mentioned before, the benchmarking. So that's on our website as well. Anything that's not there, we've also got a free trial. Obviously, if anyone wants to log onto the website, just basically create your own account, have a try at it. Our chief remote pilot is our support person, which is very helpful. When you sort of log in, they're very accustomed to the pains and joys of a pilot. So anything you guys can't see there, we're always open. We're all work in the same office together and always open for a chat. So feel free to reach out through the contact page or the support areas on our spot. So yeah, most of our content is publicly facing, and if you join our newsletter, we usually publish every week or every second week some of that content as well. So
awesome. Thank you so much. I'll make sure that I have much more info in the description in the comments below. You can see as much of that information as possible. Be sure to hit them up. I think what they're doing is fantastic. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me on this podcast. It's been an enlightening conversation. Hopefully it's been a little bit fun.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you. Thanks for having us, Jason. Really appreciate it. And likewise, thank you for all the good work you're doing. Allowing voices such as ourselves to, get exposure around the world. So
it's critical.
Really appreciate it.
Y'all make me look good. And that's my whole point. Like, I want to have these conversations so that people can understand what's happening worldwide. What tools are available, what thoughts are happening, what's trending, what's going on right now that if you're trying to enter this industry, or if you're in this industry and you've been doing this for any length of time, staying on top of what's going on is difficult. So we're here to try to bring you the best. We're trying to bring you the latest. It's an effort in futility. I know it, but I'm having fun doing it. So it works for me. So everyone, thank you so much for joining. This is Jason. Catch you next time. Bye now.
Bye, everybody.